Well, good. I guess it's good afternoon, early afternoon. Hope you guys are doing well. We are delighted to have Mr. Trey Rochford here, who is a senior vice president for the Rochford companies here in Green Hills, right? In Green Hills, and he is going to describe what goes on with his company and the kinds of things they're doing. It's a delight to have him here to share a little bit of the real world with us. Since you guys are getting credit for this, Mr. Rochford and I are going to be at the back door and collect $1 from each one of you, so we can go to lunch. That'd be good. Great to have you. We're delighted to have Mr. Rochford with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to speak with you. Tell you a little bit about what we do, and I'll try to make this relevant. You know, I remember not too many years ago, I was a student at Belmont University, and I recall that we had a chapel requirement that you had to fulfill, and they took roll. Well, I was in the business school, and I was a business student, and had a lot of stuff going on, and really didn't think that was altogether that relevant. So I remember that I had just gotten a Sony Watchman, which was a little TV that had about a 2-inch screen on it. It was fairly new on the market, and I managed to run a single earphone up my shirt and into my ear. So on those required chapel days, occasionally, you would find me with the songbook open and Gilligan's Island playing during the presentation. And to this day, I believe there's still some faculty members at Belmont that believe I'm hard of hearing because they're used to seeing me with that earphone in place. So I understand what it's like to be on the other side. I'll try to make this relevant and try to make it interesting while still dealing with some of the perfunctory subjects. My name's Trey Rochford. I'm vice president with the Rochford companies that my father started many years ago. We are a developer. We do a lot of different things. We have a construction company. We have a senior living community that we own and operate. We have a hotel that we own and operate. And I'll touch on these as we go along. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about how we've developed an entrepreneurship and how that impacts business today. The other day I was reading an article that talked about the millennial generation, and as a real estate guy, the traditional watchword about millennials is millennials are transitory, they don't save, they don't invest in real estate. It's almost looked upon as a lost generation. But when some economists started digging into it and looking at the millennials, and this is the generation that you're in, this is the world in which you will soon enter. One of the things that they found is that the traditional theory about millennials is really incorrect. True, millennials are transitory. They tend to move from market to market. They don't stay put in one place for very long. The facts bear that out. But what they found is, the reason for that is, there are not that many jobs out right now. So if you're getting out of college and you're looking for a place to work, you go where the jobs are. That inherently is going to make you transitory. And if you drill down and you look at, we come through a depressed economy, you look at what's happening, the millennials that are getting out and getting jobs, they're not able to demand the salaries that prior generations were able to demand relative to the current monetary levels. So if you look at the spending and the savings rate that millennials have, they actually save on par with all the other generations that we've seen come through. But because of the economic situation in which they're starting their life, it's more difficult for them to save. So when you look at completing your education and getting out there in the world, it's tough out there. There's not an awful lot of jobs. There's an awful lot of people that are competing for the same positions. So you may find yourself in a non-traditional role. You may find yourself doing something that's not quite exactly what you thought you were going to do. So you have to be flexible. You have to be willing to adapt. You have to take what is out there and make it your own. And that's a little bit about what I want to talk about. Like I said, I'm with Rochford Realty and Construction Company. I want to start off with a quote, and I love this quote. This is a quote from Helen Keller. Avoiding danger is no safer in the long run than outright exposure. The fearful are caught as often as the bold. So when you're looking at that as a business plan, it's easy to play it safe. It's easy to be the middle of the pack, and it's easy to just go right down the middle of the road. But there's an awful lot of opportunities out there that are outliers, that can be very profitable endeavors, very successful endeavors, but they don't quite fit the mold. They don't quite fit what the traditional norm might be. Long time ago, when I was a kid, my father was a traveling salesman for Republic Steel. He decided he wanted to do something different, so he went and he got a law degree. Now, after he got his law degree, he started building houses, which isn't necessarily a logical jump, but he found an opportunity and he thought that he could take advantage of that opportunity. Now, in 1980, a $250,000 home, the mortgage payment on that was $46,000 a year. Interest rates were pushing 18%. That's something that today is hard to fathom. When you look at your bank statement and you see that you've got a 0.25% interest on your savings account, it's hard to understand what an 18% interest rate means. But basically, if you think about that, what that means is a significant portion of your money is going to, in this case, going to pay for the housing. So the construction industry was very, very tight at that time. It was depressed. There wasn't an awful lot going on. The traditional home builders really had to struggle to make a way through. Well, what my father did was he started out building custom homes. Now, if you're in an environment where you're paying 18% interest, you can imagine when you build a house, if you're building a custom home, you're going to be very, very careful about how you go about it. So my father came up with a process. He calls it 10 and 10. What he would do is he would tell the customer, I will work with you. I'll help you get the house that you want. I'll show you what my costs are, and then I'll charge a 10% markup on that and a 10% markup on that. We'll add 10 and 10. That way, as a customer, you're completely involved, you're completely in control of the process, and you know where you are at all times. So when you're looking at borrowing money that's going to cost you 18% to borrow, that's an attractive deal for you. That's much more attractive for you to do that in that situation than to find another builder that will just kind of quote you a price as you go along. So he started building houses one at a time in arguably one of the worst markets to start construction. And he was successful doing that. Shortly after he started building houses, he purchased an apartment project down in Franklin, 13-unit apartment project. Now, again, interest rates were really high. This wasn't a time to invest in real estate. But he had the courage to say, I think I can make this work. So he worked out a deal, got the financing in place, acquired the apartment project. This apartment project backs up to the O'Moore School of Design down in Franklin, a couple of blocks off of downtown Franklin. We still have that apartment project, and I'd say probably once a month we have a developer call us wanting to acquire that property to redevelop it. So taking that risk, it paid off for him in the long run. Shortly after that, again in the 80s, my father came across this piece of land in Williamson County called Temple Hills. Temple Hills was a large development. There's a golf course there. It actually started in the 70s. The original developer had gone bankrupt. When he went bankrupt, the bank took over the project. That bank pushed off the project because they didn't want it sitting on their books anymore to another bank. That bank didn't want it anymore, so they pushed it off their books. Well, my father came in, found that bank, and said, I think I can make this work. Let's work out some terms and let's work out a deal. And my father acquired the Temple Hills subdivision down in Williamson County. Interestingly enough, as an aside, the Temple Hill subdivision was the subject, and part of the reason it went bankrupt, was the subject of a landmark Supreme Court case that set property rights, set a major precedent for property rights in the United States. Part of the reason it went bankrupt is the original developer had a plan for it and was slow in developing that plan. The county came in and said, you know what, we're going to change the rules on you. Instead of having your roads a certain width, we want them increased by 5 feet. Your cul-de-sacs have to be larger. You have less lots that you can put in. We want to change the rules on how you can develop this. So going through all those mechanics took a lot of the lots away from that developer. Well, the developer filed suit. When he went bankrupt, the bank that took over continued that suit, ultimately made it all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in a landmark decision that if a governmental authority comes in and changes the rules on property that you own, and that takes away some of your rights, that's constructive taking of rights. And that set the bar for how governments deal with property now. If they grant you permission to develop your property in a certain way, they can't come back at a later date and say we changed our mind, not without just compensation. So I don't know if you'll ever come across that in your career, but the landmark case that set that is just right down the road from here. Well, we started building houses in Temple Hills. And as we started doing that, cable TV kind of came onto the scene. Now, I know that dates me somewhat. I'm sure you guys don't know what it's like to not have cable TV. Well, at that point in Williamson County, the cable company that serviced Davidson County would not go out that far. They said, it's just too far for us to go. Well, we had a community that was going in that had several hundred homes, and the customers wanted access to cable TV. So my father said, well, you know what? I think we can do this. I think we can make this work. So he started a cable TV company out in Williamson County. Now, back then, the cable was a whole lot different than it is now. I mean, basically, you just had a big satellite dish, you pull the signal down, put it into a head end, and just send it out down the wires. Now it's digital. There's premium channels. So it's changed very significantly from that time. The technology was very young and very new, but because there was a need that was in the market, my father thought he could fill that need, so we started a cable TV company. Shortly after that, he found some land in Green Hills. It's right across from Burton Hills. There's a little church that's there, and they had some property behind them. And they had the idea that they wanted to include a senior living community on their property. So they looked around at a number of different developers that were out there, and my father worked a deal out with them and agreed with them to acquire the property by lease. And we went in and built the St. Paul Senior Living Community. 132 unit independent apartment facility. It's basically an apartment building with an age limit. So we're not dealing with the medical care, we're not dealing with licensure issues and things like that. But it's still there and it's very successful. We did this with a HUD financing program. It's a Section 232 loan. Out of all the Section 232 loans that were started in the United States, this is the only one remaining that has not taken bankruptcy. Now, this is an aerial shot of Green Hills in 1996. It zooms in on the Green Hills Mall. You can see the mall down at the bottom. If you look off on the left-hand side of the screen, you see a parking lot and a large building that's there. Our office is on the corner in the very far, the big white structure that you see there is the Dillard's parking deck. Our office is right across that. We found out that South Central Bell, or Bell South as it became, had plans to build a Batman building downtown. They didn't call it a Batman building, but that's how everybody knows it now. To do that, they needed to consolidate all their operations for all the satellite offices that they had and pull all those employees into one building. Because if they didn't have the need for that much space. But the people that were in charge decided they wanted a monument that would be an icon that would represent their company. So we found out about that, and a fellow that works with us in our office went down and got on the list to option that property that you see, that long property on the left-hand side. That was a South Central building that was built in the 60s. And I remember walking out on the back parking lot of our office one day, and my father was standing there, and he looked over at that building that had been there for years, and he said, "What would you think if we put a movie screen on top of that building?" And I looked at him and I said, "You're crazy. You're crazy. That's not going to work." He said, "No, I think this can work. I think we can make this work." So we worked out the deal to acquire that building, wound up cutting the building in half, capping off one corner of it, leaving it as an office building, which is there today. And then on the other half, we put in the Regal Cinema Complex that's in Green Hills today. And then at the top, if you notice where the road makes a turn, there's a little parking lot at the top up there. There was enough space left over that we were able to fit a Hampton Inn and put a Hampton Inn there. So we were able to redevelop that property and kind of put the shoulder on the mall property and have some very successful businesses that have gone in and done very well in that particular area. Just a couple other things that we've done. The Deerfield Apartments in Mount Juliet, we've done those in 2 phases. We put in 294 units 4 years ago in phase 1. We just finished 162 units in phase 2. It's been open for just a few months, and we're already 77% leased out there. The Green Hills office building we mentioned, and Bedford Commons. Let me mention real quickly the top 2. You know, I talked about trying to find different ways to do things and finding opportunities where you can, doing things differently. Bedford Avenue is the road. It's in Green Hills. It's 1 block away from the mall. Bedford Avenue was a small road that was predominantly duplexes that were built in the 40s. The year when Bedford Avenue was redeveloped and all the redevelopment started, there were 4 drug busts on that street where Metro went in, and people that were renters in duplexes there were dealing drugs out of that area. There were 3 generations of developers that went into Bedford Avenue before we got there. And the problem they ran into is they would option all the property on that street, but all the neighbors in the surrounding areas didn't want anything to happen. I happened to sit in on the last community meeting before we became involved in the project, and the developer came in, made a pitch for the plans that they had the architects, the engineers there, explained the math, showed the pictures. Very nice presentation. The councilman asked the developer and his team to step out of the room so the community could talk. And I wasn't involved, so I just stayed in the back just to watch what was happening. And I'll never forget, they stepped out of the room, and the councilman looked, he said, "Okay, does anybody have anything to say?" And this one guy stood up, and he said, "Well, I think I speak for everybody when I say that there is nothing that they can bring forward that we're going to approve." And the councilman said, "Well, surely there's something you like about the plan." And they said, "No, we're going to oppose anything that they do. We don't want any development that increases density towards our homes." So for the 3rd time, the redevelopment plan of Bedford Avenue was completely shut down. Well, after that, the councilman said, "Look, something needs to be done about this. This is a place that's bordering on urban blight. It's right in the heart of Green Hills. It needs to be redone." He said, "Why don't we invert the process? Instead of having a developer come in and make a pitch on what this could be, why don't we bring the community in? We'll bring the planning commission in, and everyone sit down, and we'll come up with what everybody can live with. Then we'll see if a developer can make this work." So that actually was the first charrette process that the Davidson County Planning Commission had ever undertaken. It had to do with Bedford Avenue. So they had this long process where they brought people in, came up with a redesign of the street, and then the neighborhood group, who we had worked with on the Hampton Inn. And you notice the Hampton Inn, it doesn't look like a Hampton Inn. We did it in such a way that it integrates into the neighborhood. They came and said, we really want you to take a look at Bedford Avenue. So with the entitlements in place and with everything ready to go, we came in and took the plan that community had come up with, and we were able to develop it to Bedford Avenue, to the streetscape that you see. So that's just an example of finding something that is outside the norm. It's an outlier, but it was a very successful project and it worked very well. We were able to get it done. The Oakland Elementary in Clarksville, Tennessee. That's a project that's going on right now. Clarksville is growing in some areas and not in others. So about a year ago, we have a subdivision that we're building up in Clarksville. We're putting houses in. The county came to us and they said, we really need a school in this area. We need a new middle school that's here. But there's a problem. We don't have any money for it. Now, what they meant by that is they have a certain amount of money that they are authorized to borrow, and those are tied up in their bond issues. Well, all their bonding capacity was completely used up with projects that were already in place. So they need a school, they need a middle school that is open for business at this very next school year, but they didn't have any money to pay for it. So they came to us and said, your property is right in the middle of where we need this new zoning to go. Is there something we can do to work this out? So we reached an agreement with the county, which is the first time it's ever been done this way. We are building the school for Montgomery County. We're paying for the school for Montgomery County. And we have a contract with them that they will purchase it from us at a certain date. So that way, we're using our financing capability to get the school built. The schools that need, the children that need to be in this school at the start of the next fall school year, they're going to have a new school that they can go to. And we're going to get it done on time and under budget from what the school, for what the county paid for the previous school that they had just done. So this is a project that ordinarily would never have happened. That's not the way that developers work. That's not the way that contractors work. You don't build projects like this on a speculative basis. But it worked out. We thought we could make it work, and we did. So those are two notable projects that we've done that are a little different from what you see coming across the norm. We've got another project, and I'll just mention that's in the planning stages right now. Meridian at Providence. It's out in Mount Juliet. It's another 223 apartments that are going in. It's going in right behind the Providence Marketplace area. And we're excited about that new project. It's going to be really neat. It's going to have more of an urban feel than you see a lot of the projects that are out there. It's within walking distance of the Providence Marketplace. There's a Kroger's right there. There's a movie theater right there. There's a lot of features about it that are very attractive to the modern customer. We've got a little retail component that was required to be in there. The county or the city wanted us to include some retail shops. Well, it's kind of tucked around the corner into a residential area. There's pedestrian access to it, but there's not really an awful lot of drive-by traffic that would facilitate a retail operation. So in the process of working through this, we learned that the Mount Juliet Police Department would like a substation in that area. So we worked out a deal with them where it said, well, look, if we have to do some retail, why don't you lease this space from us for your police station or your police substation? Then we'll fulfill our requirement and you get what you need, and then we can move forward. So that's on the drawing board right now, and we're probably 6 to 9 months away from starting construction on that project. So, as I said, I want to mention entrepreneurship. I want to talk about what it takes to find a project, to launch out there, and to do something different, to step out of the box. The first thing that's required is courage. Now, that's a platitude. I mean, everybody says that. Everybody hears that. You got to be courageous to do something. But what does that really mean? When I was thinking about this, I was reminded of a Sunday school lesson that I taught. I was asked to be a substitute Sunday school teacher in an adult class in a church several years ago. And I walked in. I was prepared. I knew I wanted to teach a lesson on Jonah, on the book of Jonah. Now, I walked in, and this group of people, they didn't really know me. They didn't really know who I was. They didn't really know much about my background. So I walked in, and I opened my computer, and I pulled up Google Earth, and I zoomed in on Mecca. And I zoomed in on the shrine in the middle of Mecca. You've probably seen it. It's the large cube. If you're a Muslim, then one of your requirements is sometime in your lifetime you're supposed to make a pilgrimage to this shrine that is in Mecca. And then you pray walking around it 7 times, and that's one of the pilgrimages that you're required to do. So sitting in this Sunday school class on the Sunday morning, I showed everybody the Google Earth image of this shrine. And I said, here's what I want. This is important. Who here has a passport? About half the people raised their hand. And I said, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we need to do. We are called to do this. We're going to leave here right now. We're going to drive to the airport. We're going to buy a plane ticket to Mecca. We're going to fly there, and we're going to go to this shrine, and we're going to walk into that shrine, into that building, where if you are a non-Muslim and you step foot on that building, you'll be executed. But we're going to walk in there, and we're going to preach Jesus. We're going to tell everyone there that there is only one God, and Allah is not his name. Now, who's with me? And I got about the same response that I got here. Everybody was deathly quiet. They started looking at each other. I could tell they were saying, okay, this guy's not coming back. We're not asking him to teach ever again. This guy's crazy. He's out there. Well, then I explained to him, I let him off the hook. I said, I did that as an example. That's what Jonah was faced with. He wasn't asked to just go ride in a cute little whale for a while. He was asked to walk into a place where very likely it would be the end of his life, just for walking in and saying what God called him to say. Now, how does that apply? If you're in business and you're talking about starting a new business, sure, everybody says you have to have courage. You have to be courageous to do this. But you need to understand it's the same kind of courage that God called on Jonah to have. Because you're talking about giving up your job. You're talking about giving up a secure paycheck. You're talking about going on the hook and putting your ideas and your vision and your execution on the line for the rest of your life. You're looking at borrowing money. You're looking at working harder than anybody else that's out there. You have to have the courage to take that leap of faith and to take that major step to do something brand new. You have to have that courage to step forward and start a construction company when there's 18% interest that's out there. So entrepreneurship, it's easy. Everybody can talk about it, but it takes a very special kind of person, a very special kind of dedication, and a very special kind of courage to actually go through with it and to actually be successful with it. So the first thing that you have to have is you have to have courage. The second thing is you have to have a vision. And it can't just be any vision. There's a lot of people out there that have vision. The popular show now is the Shark Tank. There's a lot of people that come in. You see people that bring things in, and they've got a vision for this wonderful product that everybody in the world knows is just flat not going to work. I had a fellow come to me one time, and he said, I've got this wonderful invention. He said, I'm interested if you would invest in it. I just need a little bit of research and development on it, and it'll be the next best thing. This is going to revolutionize the automobile industry. And I said, well, what is it? He said, well, on the front axle of a car, I'm going to put 2 wheels. On the rear axle, I'm going to put 2 wheels on the outside and 1 wheel in the middle. And I looked at him and I said, okay, why would you do that? He said, because it adds a wheel to the car. I said, okay, is there some kind of technical thing that it does to improve the car? He said, no, it's just really cool. I said, okay, so what's going to happen the first time you get a flat tire? He said, well, I hadn't thought about that. So you have to have a vision that is grounded in reality. You have to have a vision for creating something that fills a need that's out there and fills it in a unique way that's successful. You have to have the same kind of vision that my father had when we stood on those front steps and we looked over at that building and he said, I'm going to put a movie theater right there. He had a vision to see that theater, and that helped him to create that reality and to make it work. So vision is very important. Knowledge. You have to have knowledge. You have to know what you're doing. Just because you come up with an idea for something doesn't mean that you can execute it. Knowledge is critical to the process. But the thing about knowledge is you can get knowledge. And that's, in a lot of cases, where engineers come in. Engineers provide the knowledge for developers that have a vision to create something. In a lot of cases, the engineers come in and say, you're crazy, you can't do that. Or they come in and they say, well, you can't do it this way, but you can do it this way. But knowledge is critical for the execution. If you're going to be successful, you have to know what you're doing. Now, the other thing I'll mention to you, I've got a saying, the hardest thing to do in business, the number one most difficult thing that you can do, is hiring someone that is better than yourself. Now, that sounds easy. That sounds easy. But when you're sitting there and you got somebody that is just out of school, they're better trained, they're better skilled, they're smarter than you are, it's a tough thing to do, to make that call. But I heard a quote a while back that said, A's hire A's and B's hire C's. So if you're going to be successful, you have to have that knowledge, and you have to surround yourself with the people that do have that knowledge. And you have to have skill. The knowledge will only get you so far. You have to have the ability and the skill to execute what your plan is, to create that vision and to make it work. I'll just share with you a quick story. I remember when we were building the Green Hills Hampton Inn. I used to be a CPA back a long time ago, and I retired my license when I came back for the company. And we had these plans. This architect had designed these plans for this Hampton Inn. It was beautiful, beautiful hotel. We're sitting around the table, and all the plans were laid out. Everybody was looking at it. We're patting ourselves on the back that we come up with such a great idea. And I looked at it, and of course, I'd just gotten back from, a profession where I traveled, in some cases 6.5 days a week. I looked at the plans and I said, where's the ice machine? And they said, what? I said, well, where's the ice machine? You have to have an ice machine somewhere. Somebody's going to need ice. And they looked at the architect, and the architect said, oops. So the vision and the knowledge are important, but you have to have the skill to pull it together and to know what you're doing. And then finally, and probably one of the most important components, is assessment. Once you come up with a plan, once you come up with a business, once you come up with an operation or a project, you can't just start executing it. You have to constantly reassess what you do, because you have to constantly adjust to match that market, to make yourself as good as you can be. Now, you remember I started off by telling you that my dad had a plan in his construction called 10 and 10. Well, he loves 10 and 10. That's one of his favorite things. But what we found is the market changed, as interest rates changed, and people's tastes changed. What we found is that was creating a problem. And I'll give you an example of that. I have 2 sons. When they both were in elementary school, they're 2 years apart. My younger son decided to start a business during recess. He found a plan where you could take duct tape and fabricate it in such a way that you made wallets out of it, which is a great business for him because he'd go in my garage and steal all my duct tape, so he had zero product cost. But then he would go to recess and he would sell these wallets for $1 a piece. Well, he found that if he hired his friends to make the wallets when they were supposed to be playing, he could pay them a dime and sell them for $1, which was great. It was wonderful. Plan worked great. Well, my older son had just been accepted to Montgomery Bell Academy, whose school colors are cardinal and silver. So we were sitting in the car one day. I picked them up, and we were driving away from the school, and my younger son had a wallet that was red and silver. And he looked at my older son, and he said, "Would you like an NBA wallet?" And Ross said, "Well, how much is it?" And Luke said, "Well, it costs $1." Ross said, "I'll pay $1 for a wallet." So he reached in his wallet, pulled out $1, and he got this wallet. And he was beaming. He was just as tickled as he could be. My younger son looked over at him, and he said, "Wow, I just made 90 cents. And my older son said, "Wait, what?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I charged you $1. It only cost me 10 cents. My older son said, "Wait, stop, hold on. What do you mean you made 90 cents on this? It only cost you 10 cents to make this? Give me my $1 back." He said, "I'm not putting up with it." So it started a big fight. But what I learned from that is the way that we deal with change orders now, we don't go in and quote the costs, because what we found is that the customer tastes have changed. People don't want to know what you pay for something. They want to know how much it's going to cost them. When you go to buy a car, you don't walk in and ask them what their manufacturing costs are. You look at the price that's there and you decide whether or not that is a fair price in the market where you are now. So what we learned was by continuing to apply that 10 and 10 process, all we were doing is creating arguments. Customers would come in and would say, "Okay, well, here's what we paid for this, here's our markup, and here's our markup." And they'd say, "Wait a minute, I don't want to pay a markup." So we would just argue and argue and argue. So we looked at what our situation was, we made a reassessment of that, and we moved forward from there. So assessment is a critical piece to make sure that you're on track. Now, I'll kind of finish up by talking about a new project that we have that's going on right now. Just to orient you, you can see where Lipscomb is. There's a parcel of land called Stevens Valley that is in the southwest corner of Davidson County, wraps over into Williamson County. This is an aerial view of it. You can see where Lipscomb is in the circle up there. The box is Stevens Valley. Now, it's kind of hard to see on this screen, but if you look at the color changes, that'll tell you a little bit about how the development has occurred between those different areas. You see there's lots of places where there's rooftops, lots of places where there's development. There's lots of places where there's hills and trees. Now, the reason those hills and trees are still there is because they're hills and trees, and it's difficult to build on them. It's really tough. So when you look at Stevens Valley and you start going out west from there, you start getting into some pretty significant topography that makes it very difficult to build. That's why the development has occurred towards the south and out towards the west predominantly. That's why Mount Juliet is growing so quickly, and Franklin has grown so quickly. And parts of the northwest Nashville and west Nashville have not grown nearly as fast because it's very difficult to build in those hills. So the Stevens family have owned this property for quite some time. It's currently farmland. So we have an opportunity to come in and develop this property. So sitting here on the front end of this project, we have to create a vision for what we want this to be. We have to come up with how we're going to actually move forward with this. Well, the mission statement that we have is to create an extraordinary community that embraces the natural beauty of the Stevens Valley and the Natchez Trace, that has a distinctive sense of place for its residents, and leaves a lasting legacy for the Stevens family and charitable beneficiaries. If you look at that, that's a large piece of property. There's an awful lot that we could do with that. So if you're sitting here today and you're a developer and you're going to develop this property, what do you do with it? What's your plan? How are you going to develop this? This is a closer view of the property that's there. The part that's in green is the Natchez Trace Parkway. So it's surrounded almost on three sides by National Park. It's a beautiful piece of property. The central area is very well suited for development. There's a lot of different things that you could do with this property that's there. It's very close to downtown in relation to a lot of the other development that's out there, and it's an untouched piece of property. Just to orient you, north is off to your left. So what do you do? How do you develop this? Well, we want to be sensitive to the area history. The Loveless Cafe is there. Loveless has been there for years and years and years. It's an icon in the community. The Natchez Trace Parkway is there. There's a national park that bounds this property, so we have to be sensitive to that in how we go about this development. We have to protect the Natchez Trace. The Natchez Trace proponents are they very jealously guard the Natchez Trace. And one of the things that they don't want to see is they don't want to see driving down the Trace, this beautiful national park, and all of a sudden you hit a part where you see, the back doors of houses. So we've got to be sensitive to that. We have to be sensitive to nature. There's a lot of wildlife that's in the area. There's some streams that come through here. We have to be very careful that we develop it in such a way that we don't adversely impact the surrounding community. We have to be sensitive to the waterways and the streams. Every time you go in, if you take a field, when rain falls on that field, it pretty much stays in the grass that's there. Some of it will run off, but not much. If you replace that with roofs and gutters and with roads, you're significantly increasing the runoff that hits streams, and you cause flooding downstream from there, which is a potential huge liability for you at a later date. So you have to be sensitive for how you develop so that you can manage the stream that's there. Not to mention the aquatic life. Not only is it good stewardship to develop in such a way that you have minimal impact, it's also the law. So the state Department of Economic or Environment and Conservation is very concerned about how you develop so that you don't adversely impact streams and aquifers. This is a map showing the stream layout that's within the property. So we have to develop it in such a way that it gets around that and that we deal with that. We have to deal with traffic. You put a whole bunch of houses in there and you've got small roads leading out from it, you're going to create an issue. So traffic has to be a major concern so that you don't adversely impact the surrounding community, not only your own community. If you build a subdivision that you can't get out of, people aren't going to want to be there. So there's a major issue. We've got 4 major traffic points, access points that are potential problems. Got water crossings we have to deal with. So if you drill down and you look at the property as a whole, there's a lot of issues, that have to be dealt with. Utilities. You put a whole bunch of houses in there, they're going to need water, they're going to need sewer, they're going to need gas service, they're going to need electricity, cable TV. All that has to be planned for on the front end, because if you go in and do it piecemeal, you're going to wind up getting yourself in trouble later on. So here's the property. Here's the layout. How do you do it? How do you develop it? As an engineer, how would you approach this? What would your recommendation be? The first inclination is to go in and say, okay, revenue, we want to turn product as quickly as possible. So we could go in and we could develop 1,400 houses and put them all in 2 years and turn them very, very quickly. But there's a couple of problems with that. First of all, that growth would be very, very difficult to manage. You look at all the concerns that we've got, the only way we could develop at that speed is if we push a lot of those concerns off to the side. And we get in, get out, and then leave, and we leave a legacy of bad planning, bad development, and bad construction. And we don't want to do that. We want a lasting legacy. The other problem is the Stevens family. this property is very dear to them. It's been in their family for a long time, and they want this developed well. They want it done right, and we are committed to doing it right. So what do? How do we move forward from here with a property like this? So those are the logistics concerns with how you can develop it. Then you look at the vision. Ultimately, what we want to do is we want to be able to create a place where people live, because if they live here, then they're buying a product from us. So we have to find a way to make that an attractive product. Now, sure, it's beautiful, it's rural setting, it has a lot of wildlife around it. There's it's close to downtown, it has some nice intrinsic things. But what about this is going to make you, potentially as a customer, want to come and buy a house in Stevens Valley? And those are the concerns that we deal with our engineers as we're developing this. And we are in the development stages. We've not even submitted our initial planning application to the planning commissions yet. Property straddles Davidson County and Williamson County, so we've got two different planning commissions and two different codes departments we have to deal with. So how do we move forward, and how do we do this? How do we create that place? Well, with the help of our engineers, we have come up with what we feel is a very unique design for a very large project. If you look at that little triangle that's in the front, that's predominantly the front entrance. But we're not going to have a front entrance as a subdivision, because one of the things that we found is people's tastes are changing. What they are looking for in housing and what they're looking for in communities is a lot different than what it was in the past. It used to be, you go back in the 80s, you put a subdivision in, you put a bunch of stone pillars up in the front with a big sign out front that says what the name of the subdivision is, and then you have a winding maze of cul-de-sacs. Roads and cul-de-sacs that go back in there on large lots, big houses. Well, that's not what people are looking for now. So we've come up with a unique way to come up with a front door for our project without having a front entrance, without having a big monument that you have to drive through. The front of this property, I'll just share with you real quick, that fronts on Highway 100. Is not actually, it's part of Stevens Valley, but it's separate from the development. NHC is currently developing a nursing home that's going in there. And then there's a little commercial area and a small area that's currently zoned in Davidson County that will probably be built fairly quickly. What that does is that helps generate some activity that's out there and helps create a critical mass for the surrounding community that's there. NHC will have assisted living, skilled nursing, physical therapy, and memory care, which is very important for an older segment of population that's looking for some housing that's out there. And again, you can see what will go in that front commercial section. Now, once we get into the farm area, you can see that as we move south, which is from left to right across your screen, the nature of the development will change. And one of the unique opportunities that we have here is that because this is so large, we can develop it not like a subdivision, but like a town. So the little corner that's in the front, we're putting in a village core. It'll have a roundabout, it'll have a town square, it'll have multi-use buildings. And then as we move forward in that area, we get to develop that like the town center. And then as we get in, we get more into the traditional subdivision. So we get less urban the farther we go away. So I think my time's up. All right, thank you.